Morning, happy bank holiday weekend, or if you're a parent, commiserations, you can do this. Good morning, my name is Beth, and I think most of you might know me, but if you don't, I'm married to Dave, I'm mum to Joshua, and I've been a member of this congregation since January. So today we're continuing our series on lesser known heroes or unsung heroes, interchangeable, and we're continuing with the story of Abigail in 1 Samuel 25. Abigail has always been a personal hero of mine. Not only is she a woman, as we'll see, but she also demonstrates the most incredible character, and I've always wanted to be more like her. So I was very excited when the opportunity came up to talk on her. So a bit of a backstory as we're jumping into what feels like quite a complicated and long story. So the book of 1 Samuel is basically about Israel's transition from being 12 tribes to one unified kingdom, firstly under King Saul and then under King David. And I think most of us will be familiar with David, as in David and Goliath, and at this point, God has anointed him as Israel's next king. He rose to prominence under Saul, Israel's first king, who had become jealous and paranoid and was trying to kill David. David escapes and is being pursued by Saul into the desert, joined by men who are loyal to him. So that's about 600 in total. It's an epic saga, and I kind of love it because it has a sort of very medieval feel to it. And David has had multiple opportunities to kill Saul, but he doesn't because he knows and trusts in the Lord. And as a side note, a lot of the Psalms that we find in the middle of the Bible are written in this period of David's life. The whole book is a bit of a character study of these two powerful but flawed men. But in the midst of it all, we find our story today. So in the passage for today, David is in the wilderness of which is near the bottom of Israel. He had protected the men who were caring for the sheep of a wealthy man called, I'm going to say Nabal, just because that's how I read it, but you can also say, how many said it, which I think was good. Anyway, so they come to the lands of the wealthy man named Nabal, and now David comes to Nabal himself to ask for provision for his 600 men. And Nabal not only refuses, he does it in the most insulting way possible. And when I first read this, I actually kind of sympathized with Nabal, because I was like, well, actually, 600 men turning up on your doorstep asking for food is no small ask, and I would probably say no as well. But actually, at this time, it was customary to offer food to any number of travelers. Nabal was very rich, so he didn't really have any reason to hoard his wealth. And equally, David and his men had protected Nabal's workforce in this time of warfare and unrest. So actually, they deserved to be treated with respect. So after Nabal's angry outburst, we are introduced to his wonderful wife, Abigail. Now, I'm a big relationships person. I've spent the past 2 years studying relational counseling, and I believe that relationships show who we are as people, and they help us to grow. So I thought the best way to look at this passage is through relationships. So we'll begin with Abigail. It would be easy to wonder how Abigail thought a marriage like this would work. Here we see a woman in a marriage with a man who prefers drinking with his friends. He hoards his money, he's rude and quick to anger. But this was in a time where women had no say in who they married. Abigail, in the way she speaks to David later on, clearly is a woman of great faith. And the passage says she's beautiful and intelligent, and clearly none of this disappears from who she is, despite being such a difficult marriage. Through the passage, we get clues as to how long this marriage has gone on for. The fact that Abigail knows how to handle Nabal and stop him from making a rash decision shows that she knows him well. Later on in the passage, she waits to tell him about her conversation with David until he's sober. So clearly, she's used to him being drunk. I imagine the everyday reality of a marriage like this would wear anyone down. But in the small amount we see of Abigail, she shows she hasn't changed who she is. She bears this with incredible patience and gets on with running a household. behind the scenes. It definitely shows us that difficult circumstances don't have to define who we are when we know God. Another thing that struck me in this passage is how Abigail shows leadership in the way she acts. Often when we're not in an obvious position of leadership, it can be easy to forget that we're all leaders in some way, we all influence people. And Abigail is the head of a household. Her servants clearly respect and listen to her. So again, you've got to think how she must have conducted her everyday life in order to garner such respect. She is decisive, not wasting any time in going out to meet David after her husband made such a massive error. And let's stop and think about it. Your husband has just screamed at a man who is not only God's anointed, but the head of an army. I think the last thing I would do in this situation is go out and tell this man that I'm married to the person who just insulted him. I think I'd be packing my bags and taking those raisin cakes for myself, thank you very much. But this is one of the many reasons why Abigail inspires me. Her courage is immense. So next we'll look at Abigail and David. When Dave and I were engaged, we did a marriage preparation course, which kind of helped you to think through the various things that might come up in marriage, including conflict resolution. We looked at different styles of handling conflict. So where we evolve, as in we charge straight in, or where we are hedgehog, we tended to hide from conflict. And I was amazed because when we were looking at hedgehog, I realised it was modelled on me. So in all seriousness, I do try and avoid conflict. However, in this passage, we see Abigail gives us a masterclass on how to handle conflict in a way that is in between those two styles of bull and hedgehog. David is angry. He's just commanded his forces to strap on their swords and he's going to start some revenge bloodshed on the bar. But Abigail shows up, and in her conversation with David, we see a beautiful heart. She prevents yet another man in her life making a rash decision, using the skills available to her leadership, her courage, and her humility. Her leadership again comes through in her quick thinking. She doesn't tell Nabal she's going to go and rectify his mistakes. She just does it. Abigail recognizes David as God's anointed. It's striking because her husband was a supporter of Saul. So rather than letting her loyalty blind her, Abigail allows her faith to inform her about the bigger picture. She says to David, the Lord has appointed him ruler over Israel, meaning she can see his cause as a true one. She acknowledges David has kept himself from bloodshed whilst being pursued by Saul. Her courage can be seen in how she tells David not to act for revenge. She tells the man, literally, with a sword, ready to go, to stop and think about what the Lord has done for him. She tells him to think about the burden on your conscience if you do this. And it's a massive risk. But she's right, and she's got the Lord on her side. Finally, she shows her humility in referring to herself as David's servant. And obviously, I don't think many of us would refer to ourselves nowadays, but culturally back then, it was used more commonly. But the point is, she doesn't put herself in a position of telling David what to do. She recognizes that in this conversation, in this situation, the power lies with David. And she acknowledges the position God has put him in. And David is quite rightly blown away. Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers. And I see so much of Jesus in how Abigail acts. She is a peacemaker. This interaction at the beginning of her relationship with David, later on she becomes his wife, spoiler alert, but it shows that being aligned with God not only gives us wisdom, but it gives us the courage to act, to help us overcome our fear in situations where the easy route seems the most tempting. So what are the takeaways from this awesome woman? And what does it tell us about our relationship with God? I think this whole passage shows us how being aligned with God helps us to see the bigger picture and look beyond ourselves. When we see the bigger picture, we're able to be peacemakers in situations where otherwise it would be tempting to act in our own self-interest. Abigail isn't the main player in the book of 1 Samuel. She's not that well known. It's why she's included in this whole series of lesser known heroes of the Bible. But I believe her story shows us that no matter how small our role is, no matter how backstage we feel or the role is that we're in, God can use us to make an impact. Not only that, but we can make an impact simply with the things God has given us and our attitude. That's a powerful message in a world where to be seen is to be of value. And I'll finish off with a big secret about me. The thing I hate most on this earth, in this world, is conflict. I really hate it with a passion. It makes me nervous. I don't know what to do in it. But I think that's one of the many reasons why I've always been drawn to this story of Abigail. She provides us with a bit of a blueprint here as to how to do conflict well. Our humility is key. Abigail, despite being torn in 2 different directions, is able to bring God's light into the situation because she is rooted in him. And our relationship with God is the thing that anchors us and helps us to act more like Abigail does in a difficult situation. The Bible constantly shows us how God is most concerned with the attitudes of our heart. And we can look more like him the more we allow him into our lives. So this morning and this week, perhaps we can think about where we aren't rooted to God. Are there aspects of your life where you're giving in to fear? The fear of conflict or fear of anger? And where can we be peacemakers in our day-to-day lives? So as we kind of draw to a close, I'll just pray and then we can stop this. So Lord Jesus, just thank you so much for this blueprint Abigail gives us. And I pray that you empower us with all the qualities we see in her: leadership, courage, and humility.